Okay, so we've talked about things in the past like open source, we've talked about building communities, but you may have heard about this thing called DevRel or developer relations. What is it? How do you get involved and how do you build the skills? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today on Cloud with Chris. Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you folks for joining in. It is a warm day today here, so apologies if you hear background noise or fans or anything on the stream, and not on the stream, but on the recording today. We are baking, so just for our own sanity, we absolutely need those, so bear with us with that. But you know the deal, folks. If you like this content, please hit the like button, please hit subscribe, the notification bell, and if you're not listening on YouTube, you could be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or cloudwithchris.com. So show your love, show your appreciation. You know the deal. It is greatly appreciated. So we've got an interesting session today. Like you heard in the intro, we are really continuing a bit of a theme that has been going on over some recent episodes. We've talked about community, we've talked about open source, and you may have heard of this thing called DevRel, developer relations. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Martin Woodward, who's going to help us understand a bit more about what is this thing, DevRel, developer relations, and how do you get involved in it? What is the path into it? So let's introduce Martin onto the show. And hello, Martin. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you. And yes, it is baking here. We have an actual summer in the UK. What's that all about?
It's unheard of. I think, maybe it's just today, right? So we got to take it for granted. So as soon as we're done, rush out, get the hot weather.
Yeah, jump in the paddling pool.
Excellent. So I know you. We've worked together in the past as well. So not for my benefit, but maybe worth introductions for the folks listening in here.
Sure. So my name's Martin Woodward. I am the Director of Developer Relations at GitHub. And then prior to that, and where we've sort of ran into each other in former lives, I was helping Microsoft with a lot of their open source work. And some of the open source community there helped out with a lot of DevOps transformation things. Brought Git into Microsoft originally, and then was part of a large team of people that were helping Microsoft kind of change how they approached open source and kind of helping teams build communities and build, relationships that stretched outside of the company and into the community. So kind of helped with that side. Prior to that, I had a real job, and I was, doing like IT work and as a dev in insurance companies and banks and airlines, all that sort of thing. So yeah, awesome. That's me.
And I know you blasé say, that you had a job before that, but actually something we had on the show previously, JJ Asgar, big name in some of the open source communities and done a lot of work there as well. I think one of the themes we talked about was actually people don't often realize how much work goes into fostering and really invigorating some of those communities, because a lot of us see the end result and we kind of use those open source projects in our own projects, in those insurance or flights or whatever kind of solutions are being used. But we don't really think of the people and the communities that really come together to actually make that stuff. And I think, that's maybe a good basis for the beginning of where we start here. Lots of people that will probably be watching this are going to be involved in the communities already, whether they're doing podcasts or vlogs like this, whether they're contributing into open source, for example. So how do they kind of get on that journey, and what is that kind of switch, I guess, between, hey, I'm part of the community and hey, I'm now DevRel? Because they're two distinct things, but they're very intermixed, I guess.
Yeah, well, let's talk about community leadership first, I think, before. Like, DevRel is just, you're being paid to do this. This is your job, which is great. Like best job in the world, don't get me wrong. But talk about you'll find that people who are doing community leaderships are people who are creating communities, driving communities, inspiring people to be part of their groups. They stretch in all different types, and you can get involved in them in all different ways, from local user groups through to projects and things that people are getting involved in, And you'll often find that the people who are involved for lots of different reasons. Like I started getting involved in open source as a way of kind of career development. I would jump between the .NET and Java world in my professional life. And so when I was doing some .NET work, I would do some Java open source work. And then when I was doing some Java work as a paid gig, I would do some .NET as open source work as a way of kind of keeping my skills up to date and keeping current in both sort of in both stacks. And actually how I ended up where I am now is because I was working on a .NET gig for an insurance company. And so was doing some Java work as an open source project in the background. Yeah. And then that open source project that I was doing with a few friends and we kind of got together, we started getting massive interest in it from like magazines and like people wanting to buy this open source project we were working on. I'm like, so we ended up turning the project into a commercial company, building a commercial product around it, and then now it's open source. But we actually turned something that originally came together as open source. We then turned it into a commercial project, and then sold that commercial project to Microsoft, and then that became open source kind of thing. So it's been quite an interesting route. The community leadership side, you will find those people who step up. You get two types of people. You get the people who take, and then you get the people who give. And you will find the people who are givers and the community builders and who volunteer. They volunteer for everything. You'll find them working for charities. You'll find them volunteering in their local community. You'll find them on boards of governors. You know what I mean? They're people who give are generally givers, and they also tend to be the people who run user groups and help educate people. But it's okay to be involved in this for completely selfish reasons. I would get involved in user groups. I would run open source projects because they scratch my itch. And it's important to understand that there is this kind of like contribution funnel, which we can talk about. Sure. But you do not get involved unless it's solving a problem you've got. Yeah. And that's the only time you get involved. And if you're not getting value out of it, then you should stop doing it. If you've got a community that you've created and you're no longer getting value out of it, and it's starting to become a drain on you and you're starting to feel burnt out, leave. Like, stop doing it. You don't owe these people anything. You're doing this for free. So don't feel bad about that, first of all. You know what I mean? But the important thing I've always found is that if you just create something and start building energy around it, start making people feel involved and start trying to buy people, get people to buy into something, they feel a part of something. And so it's this whole like cathedral and the bazaar thing. You can create kind of a cathedral around anything. You can create a movement and a group, a passion, energy around anything at all. As long as you give it a name, you give it a thing, you give it a charter, this is what we're working on. And then you regularly feed into it energy. You regularly feed into it, we're going to get together, we're going to do these things, this is what we're going to do. You can build a community around nearly anything that you want to do because you start to get people involved. Yeah. And then it's all about growing that community over time, probably. Does that make sense? Right. Does that align with your experience as well, as a .NET, as a leader?
Yeah, completely. I was kind of mapping it to my own experiences, actually, because Cloud with Chris is just one of the strands, like you were saying, but normally have multiple strands, right? So for me, Cloud with Chris is one aspect of that. I previously volunteered on a local amateur dramatic society, in case it wasn't clear behind me with all the musical theatre posters, and run a local meetup group, user group as well. And I think exactly as you say, right, there is that give, but there is also that take. So love being able to help people. And one of the things that I'm really trying to drive with some of my team at the moment, actually, of all places, is thinking about how we scale some of the things that we do. The team that I was previously in Microsoft was all about scale. So for me, thinking about how we do things like Cloud with Chris, or how working at meetup groups or different meetup groups is, easier, I think, than having sometimes some of those one-to-one discussions, because you're able to kind of broaden that message and get that out to a lot more people than you would if you had to speak to every single person individually. And that's why I like doing this stuff, because actually a lot of people don't know what they don't know, right? And helping inspire and encourage people to go on a journey, and whether it's a learning journey or whether it's open source or whatever it may be, helping people along that journey is something important to me, and it just so happens that actually it aligns with what I want to do with my career longer term. I want to go into DevRel and do that as a job. So it kind of, as you say, scratches both itches. But I think it's wise advice that, especially in the world we're in today, where it is fast-paced, things are moving very quickly, it is very easy for things to kind of add up, and especially in a world, again, whether it's community or whether it's getting paid for it in the DevRel space, you are almost on a pedestal, aren't you, in this kind of world? And you are visible, and it can be a world that can be quite cruel at times as well. You know, you can have people who, you give the best intentions to the world, you manage and maintain this open source project, and actually you get abuse, you get people, shout at you because you merged some change and it broke their project or something like that, and you have to deal with these things. And
this expectation management mismatches, like I've had somebody shout at me this morning saying, why hasn't this been merged yet? And I want to reply back, because I was on vacation. And I encourage people to do that because I couldn't be bothered, sorry, or not interested. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons, because it is your free time. And there's lots of people who like assume that, they have like wrong assumptions going in. And so you kind of have to set expectations with your community about what this is about, what we're involved. If you want to get involved, you help out, all that sort of stuff. And don't feel, as the leader of that community or the maintainer of that project or whatever role you have, don't feel that you have to meet people's expectations of you. Set what the limits and the boundaries of the community are that work best for you. And then people can join it if they want to, and it's up to them. And now you do want to be inclusive. You want to like set a great community. You want to create a community that's full of people you want to hang out with. You want to make sure that your community, is a safe place for people to be in, and like, so that you get the kind of people that come and hang out with you that you want to hang out with you. But yeah, understand that it's your community and you're usually doing it for free. So you can set the boundaries of what you want that community to be, and that's just great.
Absolutely. And I think, to just come back to your point again, it is all about whether it brings energy or whether it takes energy. And we've done plenty of sessions on the channel previously about mental health. And I think if it gets into that taking energy space, that's a good indicator to say, right, maybe I need to back off at this point and hand the reins over to someone else, which again is completely okay. You've stood up that community. And even something really interesting that is tangentially related, I guess, I saw with HashiCorp, for example, their CEO, for example, is stepping down as their CEO and now going back to being a developer, was the founder, for example, and has kind of said, right, I've done what I needed to do, I've got it to the place where I wanted to get it to, I actually just want to go and carry on developing again. So it shows that no matter who you are and what your community is, even if it's a big company like HashiCorp, you can still, step back and do what brings you energy and focus on what wants to focus your energy, I guess, as well.
It's a very privileged position to be in, to do that for your work, but for definitely the things you're doing in your spare time, like, you should totally give that to yourself, make that available for yourself. But it is nice to also be able to go, oh, well, I don't need I've got all the money I need. I'm just going to step down and be an IC dev, that is good.
That's it.
But one of the proudest things I've ever done as a community leader is have the community at the point so that I'm able to hand the reins over to somebody else, and it's been successful or it's carried on. Like, some of the biggest regrets I've had is when I've let things, like when, again, you get into spaces where you can't carry on and you kind of let things die suddenly, and you feel like you've let the community down because it wasn't a graceful end or anything like that. It's kind of not died a natural death, or it's not handed over to somebody else. It kind of died suddenly and you left people bereft. Like, that's not good. I feel bad about times that I've done that, but even I've done that, and where I'm proudest is where things have carried on and succeeded after I've moved on to other things, So it's all good.
Gotcha.
But anyway, do we want to do DevRel, or what should we could go deep on this all night?
I know. So what I was thinking first maybe is definition of DevRel, right? Because I think what a lot of people, I've seen many threads on this, I'm sure we'll get some interesting comments and discussions when the video goes out here as well. But I think the main misconception I see is people looking at this video and going, right, this right now, me and you talking, this is DevRel. The fact we're presenting, the fact we're chatting, the fact we're kind of doing this thing right now. But it's so much more than that, right? The community aspect is probably like the 70-80% of what DevRel is, and that presentation piece, even though it's the most visible piece, is actually one of the smaller kind of bits of it.
Yeah, definitely. So developer relations is what it said: relations with developers, relationships, networking, contacts. It encompasses, like, in a larger company, it could encompass several different roles. So say at a place like GitHub, we have developer advocacy, which is what you would think of as DevRel quite often if you don't know the field. So, when you see people up on stage presenting, when you see people on a live stream, when you see people doing demos and in keynotes and things, like that's developer advocacy, which is again, that's one portion of developer advocacy, but that's that kind of role. And the clue again is in the name developer advocacy. If somebody's presenting, their job isn't to present. Their job is to give presentations, learn, listen, and use that as a value exchange with the community for getting insight from that community. So I present, we give feedback, we have comments, and then we look at the comments that people coming back. We look at the learnings. We look at what resonates. We test messaging with people. We test explaining different things to people. And then we give feedback to the different teams. Usually the most successful place for developer relations teams to live, in my opinion, is inside product engineering inside of a company. And that's where it lives in GitHub. But there are sometimes it's in marketing, sometimes it's in different places. But in my personal experience, the most successful place is within product. Because then you can give feedback back into product to help make the products better, to help make documentation better, to help make the support better and all that sort of thing. In marketing, it can get to linked to revenue, and it can get to linked as like a top of funnel exercise, like bringing people in. And then that can, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, that's okay. But what you're not doing is improving the product, and it tends to be, if you're a developer, you want to be making things better, and so these are the people you hire, and so it works better. And then so that's developer advocacy, two-way engagement, that sort of thing, building networks, building relationships. Then we have in GitHub, we have developer programs. So we have so that's things like you might have seen the GitHub Stars program, which is but you also have things like the MVP program at Microsoft is another example of a developer program. We have programs that we run where we have outreach to sort of top maintainers, top open source projects, I hate using the word influencer, but people who have an outsized kind of impact based on their contributions. And so we build up these networks, and we build them up in different communities, and we kind of very deliberately map out different communities. So who are the people in the Python community, who are the people in Node, who are the people in serverless, DevOps, all this sort of thing. Build out these communities of interest of different people, and then build relationships with them. And try and do that in a programmatic way, which then we scale and we build programs around and we build systems around. So we have a very small group of people. Like the total group in this side is probably less than 10 people, and yet they manage all those different programs. They do all the developer advocacy. They do all that for 65 million developers, which is how many developers use GitHub. So plus. So that's like gives you an idea of kind of like the rarity of these roles. But every company now is dealing with developers, so everybody needs one or two DevRel people, and we're lucky at a company, like the bigger companies are lucky, or the ones that are developer focused are lucky, because we get to build, we get to be able to justify kind of larger teams, and then that has specialization. And then there's a couple of other areas that tend to fit into DevRel. So documentation, so docs. Quite often reports direct, like in GitHub, Docs reports into DevRel, and so Docs is part of the overall developer relations team, so they report into me. But you also sometimes that's separate, which is perfectly fine, because Docs can be a peer and like can be directly reporting into product. That's perfectly healthy. And then but it's quite common for it to sit within the DevRel kind of overall organization. And then again, in other organizations, things like education outreach programs and student outreach programs, things like that. they can be a program, a community that sits within the overall DevRel umbrella. Within GitHub, we actually split that out and have it as a peer team of ours. It's a sister team of DevRel, because we put so much emphasis over the education side, but also because we have specific engineering requirements and specific engineering teams dedicated just to our campus experts, just to our GitHub Classroom products, and to some of our features that we deliver into education. And because of that, we kind of give them their own org to sit in. So kind of like the outreach sides for the education thing live within that team as well. So whatever makes sense for you all. But that generally is kind of like the orgs and the kind of career structures within those orgs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess there's the nuances, like you say, kind of on an organization by organization basis. But I think one of the other things that's important, maybe is another misconception sometimes as well, is that first word of developer relations, developer. I think when you look at a company like Microsoft, for example, they've got the cloud advocates as a good example. And not necessarily always developer focused. You've got folks in the community like Sarah Lean, for example, who are very infrastructure focused and kind of migration, etc. focused. So whilst there's that developer term, sometimes it can extend to things like IT pros and other areas. But I guess in today's world as well, everyone's becoming a developer, no matter if you're, an ops person who's doing a PowerShell or your Terraform or whatnot, whether you're a data scientist, you're probably putting code somewhere anyway. So it's more of an all-encompassing idea, isn't it, I guess?
It is, but also there are fairly specific things as well, which the developer and IT pro audience, the developers, they're just it's just we as an industry tend to split out once you get down. But if you were talking to a muggle, somebody outside of the IT organ, they would think of if your job is to be a sysadmin, and fix printers in your company or keep the NAS running and things, you're, as far as your family are concerned, you're a developer, you're an engineer, you work, as my grandma would say, he works on computers, and that's what she, that's my job as far as my 104-year-old grandma is concerned, who's lived through 2 pandemics and still doing well.
Awesome.
So we're not going to gatekeep there onto who is and who isn't a developer, like everybody is. But the importance is that developers don't want marketing. There's times when developers do want marketing. Everybody loves stickers, everybody loves swag, everybody loves. But it's then there's times where you want a nice site, you want to see adverts, you want to be able to share things with people. You still need marketing around, but you also need a collection of people where it's technical. Give me the information I need to be able to do my job, and don't sell to me. I just I'm already here. I'm already a customer. Just tell me what I need to do my job and move on. That's a whole one set of people. And then the other part of things at GitHub, when I mentioned programs, is obviously GitHub's part of GitHub's community and community management is obviously the open source community around GitHub. And so if we we can't ever forget about that. That's not just key to the lifeblood of GitHub, it's key to the lifeblood of basically everybody we've hired. And so if we were to lose that, we wouldn't just lose our community, we'd lose all the people, because the people are here to make the open source community better, as well as make software that helps enterprises scale and do software and stuff, So part of my team is just dedicated as one of the dedicated to, as one of the programs, just checking on the health of the open source community on GitHub. What can we do to help people? How can we help them be more successful at building their communities and building little communities of maintainers, building communities of projects that are big on GitHub and things, and bringing them together and building a space for them to talk to each other and things as well. So, that side of things is important to us as well, really, which is unusual for GitHub for most people. Most people is just talking straight to developers quite often.
Yeah.
So.
No, gotcha. And I think some of the things you said in there, Martin, really resonate, because when I, what I explained earlier about the whole the passion area for me is kind of scaling, being able to, work with people on a broad basis, to achieve some of the things that you were just mentioning there. It just would not work if you were going kind of organization by organization, customer by customer, kind of going, right, how are you doing this? What are you doing here? Let's help you along your journey. It just doesn't scale to the level you need it to. So you need to work with the community through others. And I think that's probably one of the big skill set areas, isn't it? And where people may be a bit uncomfortable going into DevRel is it is quite not a unique skill set. It's really leadership, isn't it? About sharing that vision, showcasing what you want, and then being able to work with others and inspire and really encourage others to kind of go on that journey.
Yeah, and there's a combination of tactics there to where you help people. If you're a teacher in a class, you've got 30 people you're trying to lead or whatever. You do some one-to-one conversations, you do some one-to-one mentoring, but you couldn't do the whole day by just doing those things. And so you need to be able to do things that scale out and allow everybody to get up to a certain level, and then go do some one-to-one conversations to get like certain people up, or to get the precise detail that you need. So if we look at my average day, or the average day of somebody on my team, it would probably be like there's a combination of doing stuff like this or doing like public sessions and things. Yesterday I did a session to like, I don't know, about a couple of hundred people inside a single company, but helping them get up to speed to something. I've done like a bunch of one-on-one conversations today as well, because remember, I'm trying to make my product better. I'm trying to make like the thing we deliver better for the people that use it. Yeah. And so I'm constantly doing like value exchange as part of that. So I will come in and I will talk to some organizations. Usually it'd be great for me to do a thing like this, or like, podcast or webcast where I'm hitting like 4,000 people in one go, which is more than you would get at like a big like tier one keynote, and so by doing some of this online stuff, you can get massive reach, but what you don't get less of is feedback.
Yes, yeah.
But what you would do is you go do some smaller level conversations so that you can get the direct feedback, so then you can learn from everyone. Like I'll read all the comments and I'll listen in and things, but that's only a certain level of feedback I'll get. If I go and have a one-on-one conversation or a 1 to 10 conversation with a team, and then I do 10 of those across different market sectors, I can then start to pull together patterns and like feedback that I can then feed in and say, hey, it turns out we really need this feature, and that will solve these 5 problems I'm seeing across different sectors of the business. Or people come to me and was like, what do developers care about this year? What should we have in our conference? And based on the conversations you've had and based on the questions people have been asking you, you kind of are able to infer what are the hot topics and things that people are interested in hearing about.
Absolutely. Love what you just said there. I think that was, in my old role, something that I really instilled and was very big about was the team we were in. We were very passionate about product feedback and improving the product, improving Azure. And, I think there were times where I'd have discussion trying to mentor and coach people and say, it's not just about exactly what the customer is telling you and exactly saying, hey, this thing is broke, or hey, this thing could be improved, or whatever the scenario is. But, if they're nervously kind of going through an experience, not quite certain on what they're doing and asking loads of questions, that in itself is feedback. If they're asking you loads of qualifying questions, that in itself is feedback.
Yeah, if they're struggling to understand something, that's amazing feedback, because now this area is too complicated, or now people really struggle with this. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But when you're giving feedback, actually, a friend of mine called Sasha Rosenbaum, Divine Ops, I'll send you a link to put into the show notes, whatever. Oh. But she's done a great post about providing technical feedback. Now she's in technical sales over at Red Hat, so it's very much aimed at sellers. But actually, it's a great kind of explanation on giving feedback for everybody, including giving feedback to open source projects, because it's sort of giving actionable feedback, and this happens a lot with open source projects. You get, why doesn't X do Y? You're an idiot kind of thing. Like you can see that all the time. Yep. Or why doesn't this do this? This is crazy. And so usually the answer is usually twofold. It's it usually isn't because we haven't thought about doing that. Like ideas are easy.
Yep.
Implementation's hard. Talk is cheap. Code is what counts, with an open source project. But ideas are easy. Quite often it's done a certain way because of effort or because of limitations or whatever. There's usually a bunch of reasons why that isn't there.
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out how to collect the feedback of not this is what I need, but these are the problems I'm seeing, and then that allows us to think about 3 or 4 different solutions, and that allows us to see how many problems we can fix with different solution mindedness. And so as developers, we try to go very, very quickly into solution mindedness because that's what we think. And so we think, oh, well, I'll go build this. I'll go build a .NET Core React app with whatever, like you go straight to there.
Yeah.
Actually, you want to spend a good amount of time in problem statement, in problem mindedness rather than solution mindedness, stating what the problems are, and then allowing the engineering teams to test different solutions on those problems and work with you. And then the best solutions are like a super minimal thing, which actually solves 50 problems, like by moving a button higher up on the screen or like by inventing a simple single concept. That's one of the things I love about GitHub Actions is it's a tiny atomic little concept. We can run automation for you that happens to be in a YAML file, and you can reference automation which exists in another repo somewhere, which you can go access and create. Like, it's a simple concept, but that automation concept then lets you solve like an infinite number of problems. Whereas if another way of solving that, or a way a different company would have approached solving that, would have been to go solve individually 10 or 20 of those problems and things, rather than giving you the tool as a developer to go solve all those problems yourself, So
I've got to add it on because I'm a big GitHub Actions fan. I love that point that you mentioned, that every action is a repo, because the possibilities pretty much are endless, right? You're really allowing the open source community to go and build and see what comes back. And I've built my own GitHub action actually for cross-posting my Hugo Markdown content to Dev2 and to Medium.com. So again, that's just one example. Probably would never have been in the original use case, but because of that flexibility, that's something I was able to build on top of it. So big fan of that.
Well, and also it allows people to come in and build stuff which might be on your roadmap. There's stuff which like you say, which would never have been on your roadmap. But then there's things like people who've created amazing release note actions, which, of course, release notes would have been on the roadmap at some point. But now somebody's folded it for us, so why bother? But this kind of also feeds back into why communities. Because if you build a community well, and if you make that community feel bought into, like the members of that community feel bought in, so they have a stake in the game, then that you end up getting a network effect, because now your community has a lot of members. It then becomes the place where everybody else wants to go. And then that's when you get kind of like the hockey stick growth that, say, GitHub has, or even say something like GitHub Actions has. GitHub Actions was based on a lot of the infrastructure of things like Azure pipelines and stuff. Right? But yet there are 9,000 actions now in the marketplace, with countless other ones that aren't even in the marketplace. Like, that's bigger than the Jenkins community. That's orders of magnitude bigger than the Azure pipelines community was. But because it was built in a way that's different to pipelines, that has this network effect that makes it super easy for people to build and extend, then you start to get a community that now is outside of your control to a certain extent, but is self-sustaining, self-growing, and is going to survive long past your involvement in that community.
And you've almost got this osmosis effect then as well, because as soon as you've got the GitHub Actions community, you've then got people who are going to be enthusiastic about all the other things coming out with GitHub. So Code Spaces, again, big fan. Copilot, big fan. There's lots of really interesting things. And I think for me, as someone who's followed GitHub for a little while, I realised this year is my 10-year anniversary on GitHub, by the way.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah. When is it? When will that be?
It was May.
So I could have sent you a tweet. Never mind.
I did do a tweet about it. I was like, I'm 10 years old on GitHub. But I think over the past few years, there really has been this shift in the way you're seeing GitHub kind of approach that. And as you say, really rallying communities around it and building it and seeing it all grow. And it's really awesome to see and a great example of that.
It is. And it also has an amazing level of accountability. That's something I'm very aware of.
Yeah.
Because like the community is bigger than me, bigger than us, And so, and people feel very bought into it, which means also you have to live by higher standards, and you have to do things, people hold you accountable to that as well. And so that's why when, if something happens that they're not happy about, they'll be very, very quick to tell you. And but I'm fine, to be honest. I'm good with that. It helps us hold accountable and things. People can be nicer about it sometimes, fine. But, I'm fine with that because it shows the love that people have for something, that they care enough to tell you when they're disappointed, or when or when they'd rather you do things differently.
Gotcha.
Like quite often you can be, and I've worked in places and I've been in situations where you're doing things, nobody cares, and nobody's giving you any feedback, positive or negative, because they just don't care. So I'd rather be in a place where people care and I get the occasional negative feedback than being in a place where people don't care. So
and I think the main advice I'm probably guessing that would be given there is trying not to take it personally, right? Trying not to get too attached and taking some of that feedback as, hold on, people are telling this to me. As you say, it's because they care. It
is because they care. And assume best intent is usually that. Now, don't get me wrong, there are trolls,
of course,
and there are people who don't have the best of intent, and you need to. The way that trolls work is deliberately to I call it emotionally DDoS you. So they very, very deliberately are doing tactics to slow you down and do something which is going to require you more energy or more bandwidth to respond to than it takes them to say it.
No.
And they're doing it as a very deliberate tactic, and often it's used to silence minority views, silence views they disagree with. Which is, it's a tactic those types of communities use. So you do have to recognize that and just ignore it. But the vast majority of times, and the vast majority of people on the internet assume the best intent. Like, what is it they're trying to tell me with this? Like, what is it they're trying to say? And then go from there and meet them. The other thing you got to realize is most people assume you won't see the thing that they're posting on the internet. And then what you realize as a creator of things on the internet is that you read everything, and you can see 1,000 thumbs up buttons to this video, but that one thumbs down button that somebody puts on, that's the one that keeps you awake at night. And it's amazing the way that this happens. And, you just have to kind of push past that a little bit, but kind of understand, assume best intent, understand where they are, and then move on.
Wholeheartedly agree, especially on those thumbs downs. They do have a higher weighting in your mind, don't they, somehow? It's very strange how our brains work, but there we go.
Nobody even thumbs down this video, right? Chris cries at night.
I know. So, don't tell everyone, Martin. Don't let them know.
I know. Exactly. But no, it's perfectly natural, and it's the same when you do a pull request in an open source project or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. When you do that first pull request, you've invested so much into it, and you're so invested into it. If it goes into this pool of silence and nobody responds, you're going to be the one that replies is, why hasn't this been merged yet? Because you've got to remember where that person is.
Yes.
That person isn't on holiday. That person is they've given their all to this community. They want to be involved, and now you're ignoring them. Of course, they're going to feel a bit put out, and they're going to feel a bit upset, and they won't come back, because quite often they'll do something and they'll never come back. So, you do know if you want to build a community, you want to be responsive. You want to allow people to get involved. And then I talk about this contribution funnel, just quickly, because I mentioned it at the beginning. With an open source community, you've got to kind of think about, why do people get involved? 99% of people who are involved in your open source community, 99.9% of people just consume. They just take the thing you created, they use it or they don't. They try to use it anyway. They may be successful or fail. And they try it, they use it, they're successful, they fail. They just don't tell you. They use it, they go away, and they never come back to you, and they never give you any feedback. That's completely natural. That's completely normal. That's how it works. if you think about the whole projects that you've ever used in your life, most of them have fallen into that category. And only one or two of you actually got involved in, and have you given any time to. So remember, that's the other way around. Most people consume, only a few people will actually give you time. They will only give you time if they've got value. If they get value from your project, then they will give you time back. And they will only contribute code if when they give time, they get return and they get involvement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're only going to come next, and then they're only going to maintain if when they've contributed code, they feel like they've got a sense of ownership, they feel they're being included, they feel they're being listened to, and there's extra value being involved in this project. And over time, they'll come into the point where they want to co-own, co-lead, co-maintain this project. So understanding that funnel then allows you to think about how you maximize each stage of the funnel. So if you know people are only going to give you time if they've been successful consuming, then you need to maximize the number of people that have successful consuming. So you create a good README, you have good screenshots in it, you give good guidance, you give good getting started guidance. You're aiming your communication at the people who are consuming, because that's your primary audience. But then of the people that are giving time, people that give you time don't necessarily give you time in ways that you want. They might deliver you a feature that you don't want to implement. They might create issues and things that you don't need. So they might not give you all the data that you need. So helping them by doing like issue forms and helping them or setting a contribution.md file, which says what kind of contributions you want. Maybe mark issues as, good first issue or something, or, help wanted or something like that. Like you can then identify and help channel people who are giving you time, giving you the time that you want, so that you're likely to accept it, which will then keep them in your community later, and so you can drive again, maximize the number of people that give you time to be the people that are giving you time that you appreciate and you want, because then that helps you respond to them, and then pull you down to the next level of funnel, which is code. And again, have you got a CI build? Have you got pull requests set up? Because that means that the people who are giving you code get more feedback quicker. And so even if you are on vacation or you are asleep, they're still going to get quick, rapid feedback back. Give them some code reviews, and then again, be responsive to them to help try and pull people down into co-maintain. And then finally, if you want people to help maintain the project, are you willingly letting them into your community? And are you willingly letting them set direction? Because if it's only you allow to set direction of the project, then only you will set direction of the project. If you don't allow some people to try setting direction, then they're never going to define direction themselves and never get to the point where they co-lead or co-maintain your community. And so you need to try things, understanding 9 out of 10 people you give them the opportunity to won't take it because they don't want to, life exists or whatever, for 100 reasons why they won't. But if you don't try them, knowing you're going to be disappointed most of the time, then you won't get that one person out of 10 that actually gives you some value back and comes in and starts maintaining the community. So I try and think about its contribution funnel a lot and understand, like, it's all about, and dev relations is all about empathy and building two-way value relationships. Understanding what the value is for the person coming in, and understanding what my value is, and trying to think about how can we engineer this so that we both get value out of this relationship.
Yeah, gotcha. And I love that summary there. I think as you're explaining that contribution funnel, I can see my own journey in various open source projects and kind of where I've almost stopped along the funnel. I'm already
where you dropped out.
Exactly. And I'm already thinking of what it was that made me drop out, and I can see some of the points you mentioned. So completely get it. Some
of the best maintainers I've ever worked with, like, this is why I have the best job in the world, because I get to work with open source maintainers all the time and like help them be successful. Open source maintainers, like, they can be a bit spicy sometimes, some of them on the internet and things, but they're genuinely the nicest people you ever meet, because you don't get to be the maintainer of a successful open source project if you're not including people's views, if you're not listening to people. You don't get to be one by just being opinionated and writing a lot of code. You can only do it by listening to people, building a community around you, allowing people to be part of this journey with you. And then you get to build a big project like Kubernetes or whatever. Like Brandon, Brandon's one of the nicest people in the world, or
Absolutely.
lots of different people I've learned from in terms of like great maintainers of projects. Just the nicest people you're ever going to meet.
Excellent. Cool. So I guess then we've talked about what is DevRel. We've talked about kind of what it's not and some of the myth busting behind that, I guess. We've talked about even some of the areas in DevRel about, presenting, for example, community building, etc. I think we've covered some of the, how to gain some of those skills, like the community building side. I think we've covered pretty clearly. The presenting side, I think, again, we've kind of covered with like meetup groups and things, podcasts, vlogs, all of these things, and being able to get started.
Yeah, I mean, meetup groups are harder to do now because nobody's doing them. So, but why not do a Twitch stream? Why not do like YouTube videos? Like, start doing some videos, start creating content. Yes, you're going to have no audience to watch it because nobody does, but you're going to get practice and you're going to build up skills. Some people will, but you're building up the skills, you're building up the knowledge, and you're building up the corpus of information so that when somebody does discover you, they can go back and see a bunch of stuff, and then they're more likely to subscribe and all that sort of stuff. So there's different ways of building that knowledge than there were probably when I was a kid and putting my teeth in this space. But yeah.
Gotcha. And I guess given we've covered those areas, would you say there's any other areas that when you're thinking about someone going on their journey in DevRel, tips and tricks that they should be thinking about?
Build a community around yourself. Build that can help you and that you can learn from and they can learn from you. Build your networks, specialize in a certain area, go build that out, because your networks stay with you throughout your whole career. And if you can be out there helping people, doing good, and like putting positive, this sounds very hippie-ish now.
Here we go.
If you're out there putting positivity into the world and you're out there spreading positive karma and things and just being helpful and being nice and giving people the time and helping them get up one rung on the ladder, and helping them make that. These people will be the bosses sometimes. These people will be in different positions sometimes. And, that they will pay it back. They'll pay it forward. So just be spreading positivity, build up a community around you, build up your skill base, and see if it's something you enjoy. And if it's something you enjoy and you've got a community around you, then hopefully you can then, be in the position. You want to get yourself in the position so that when there is one of these rare roles that comes up where you can get paid to do this for a job, which is super rare, that you're in a good position to take one of those roles and do that, like you've done and like other people have done.
Excellent. Brilliant. So I think that's a really nice place to kind of tie the bow and wrap things up there. So Martin, big thank you for joining. I think for anyone who is thinking of going on that journey or even the community building side, lots of great stuff to take away there. So thanks for sharing your insights and your own journey. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Always good to talk to you, Chris. Anyway, take care.
There we go, folks. We have been talking all about community building, DevRel, Martin's journey along that as well, thinking about open source, thinking about the way that GitHub thinks about some of these things as well. Lots and lots for you to go and digest there. So definitely watch that one back again because I think there's a lot of great insights. So you know the deal. We said it in the beginning. We probably said it midway through as well. If you've liked this, please support. Please don't do the dislike button. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell. And of course, a number of other platforms you can do that on as well. So with that, folks, stay safe, stay healthy. And until the next one, thanks for watching and bye for now.